Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the IBAC webinar series. Today, presented with Martina Becher and Captain Claude Hurley, talking about carbon emissions regulations in business aviation, IBAC's introduction to EU, Swiss, and UK ETS and ICAO's CORSIA. I'm Catherine Hilst, and I am the ISBEO Operations Manager and your host for the day. I do have a couple of housekeeping items for you due to the number of attendees. All of the audience members will be on mute. You stay on mute through the presentation, but we do have a place for you to submit questions or comments at any time through the presentation. You go to, at the bottom of your control panel, you'll see a questions section, and you can just type in anything you like there, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. So we're very excited to host this session about carbon emissions regulations in business aviation. This is intended to help business aircraft operators determine if they're covered by any of the European Emissions Trading Schemes, ETS, and the Global Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation, CORSIA, launched by the International Civil Aviation Organization. The webinar also serves as an introduction to IBAC's guide to European, Swiss, and UK ETS and ICAO's CORSIA. ETS and CORSIA requirements can have a direct impact on business aircraft operators' regulatory compliance, operational readiness, costs, reputation, and competitiveness. This webinar and IBAC's guide aims to cover key factors an operator should consider when determining whether and to what extent their organization's operations may be subject to any of these schemes, and should also help operators be better informed when working with third-party organizations that can assist with compliance. Our presenters today are Captain Claude Hurley and Martina Becher. Captain Claude is an aviation professional with over 35 years of experience leading IBAC's environmental and flight operations initiatives. In these roles, Claude represents IBAC at key international civil aviation organization bodies that develop international standards on environmental and operational safety matters. He is also IBAC's nominee to ICAO's Advanced Air Mobility Study Group, tasked with harmonizing global efforts to establish regulatory frameworks to enable the safe integration of these rapidly evolving new entrants, such as eVTOLs, into our shared skies. All right, Captain Claude, I will let you do the honors with Martina, and it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Catherine. And look, it's really great to see so many of you joining us today. I realize it's the last few days of what's been a very busy spring, I'm sure, for all of you. And people are looking forward to your summer plans. So thank you for taking the time. It's great we have this opportunity to discuss this very important topic with you. So I am Claude Hurley. I do the Environment and Flight Operations Advanced Air Mobility files for the International Business Aviation Council, and we advocate on your behalf at international organizations like ICAO and with states. Joining us today is Martina Becher, who's a well-recognized expert on ETS and CORSIA compliance with over 15 years of experience in this field. And so for the last couple of years, we've been working together to develop what is hoped to be a simplified version of what is a complex and evolving series of intertwined regulations and schemes. And so I hope you've had a chance to download the IBAC, ETS, and CORSIA compliance guidance document. If not, the links will be provided as part of the webinar as well. But let's begin. So Martina, just briefly to add a bit of color to your background, and then we'll move to the next slide after that and give you an outline of what's going to be a really interesting discussion, I'm sure. Martina, if you please.
Well, thank you, Claude. Thanks for the introduction. As Claude has already mentioned, I've been working on ETS, or been tasked to work on ETS already back in 2009 when aviation was included within EU ETS, and ever since I've been working on this. And over the last couple of years, especially since 2019, almost every year a new scheme, a new compliance report has been added. So it's become really, really complex. As such, I've contacted IBAC, or we started talking about this 2 years ago, and said this is becoming so complicated, people really lose the overview. Even me, having been working on this for so long, it's really hard to keep on top of it. So we started working on this guide, and this webinar is based on our guidance document. And we simply hope that it's helpful for you all. Thank you. Back to you, Claude.
Thank you very much, Martina. It's great to have you here today, and it's been great working with you over these last couple of years to develop this. So both the webinar as well as the guidance document are meant to be brief introduction to what is complex evolving schemes. That said, we hope it gives you enough of an insight to first determine whether or not you might be captured by these schemes, and if you need additional resources, where you might look for those additional resources. The guide is a good start. There are a number of primary reference documents which we encourage you to look at. Some of those links are in the guide, and we'll provide them as well in the webinar. For this webinar today, I'll play a role that I'm familiar with. So I'll play the pilot operator that has not seen much of ETS and CORSIA and has a lot of questions. And Martina will play the role that she's very familiar with, which is the ETS expert. So keep that in mind as we go through it. We will cover the three main schemes in the European Union, so the EU, Swiss, and UK ETS schemes, as well as the international scheme under ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, their CORSIA scheme, which stands for the Carbon Offsetting Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. So we'll use acronyms from now on, but feel free to ask any questions if we missed something in the chat function, as nicely explained by Catherine. So we have a decision tree that's the core part of our guidance document, which helps, we hope, pilot operators and commercial operators to decide whether or not they might be captured by these schemes and what to do. That's the next steps, initial next steps. And then we'll go through a couple of practical examples that might be relevant to your own experiences. And we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So next slide, if you please, and then up to you, Martina, if you please.
Thank you, Claude. Yes, so let's start and dive into this. So to give you a bit of background information, as I mentioned before, I had been tasked of working on ETS already back in 2009. However, aviation was included in EU ETS back in 2012. So it took quite some time for operators to get ready for compliance back then. And obviously it was brand new back then. Everybody thought it is so complicated. And then there was a few years whilst everybody got the hang of it, everything became rather smooth. And then back in 2019, CORSIA has been came into effect. 2020 was the come into effect of the Swiss ETS, and 2021 UK ETS. So 3 years, 3 consecutive years, there were three new schemes that have been set up for aviation to comply with. However, what is important is the goal of all those schemes is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions of aviation, and that's also the goal of CORSIA. And initially, the EU ETS was designed to also cover flights to and from Europe, and also that operators would have to compensate for those flights. But that then was changed because there was a lot of political discussion around this, and that's when ICAO got tasked with designing a global system, and that was started in 2014. Anyway, so just a bit of background.
It's really interesting.
And what is important? Yes?
No, I was just going to point out it's really interesting, and certainly the goal is to reduce carbon emissions overall. And that ties in nicely with the business aviation's community goal that we've agreed to first in 2008 and then renewed in 2021 ahead of the ICAO assembly to essentially commit to our own reduction of the impact on climate. We call that the Business Aviation Commitment on Climate Change, so the BACCC. And the links will be provided, of course, in the document, but it's easy enough to find. So I'm glad these systems and schemes are tied to our own goals as well. So I see the link now. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, we have to do something, right? Going back to the scope of those different schemes, so now you see it's 3 different schemes all over Europe. So they are national schemes as well as regional schemes. That's the EU ETS. However, the scope is very well similar. What I think is really important for you to understand, there are different scopes here, and there are the names of reporting scope, and there's an extended full scope. And this is important. This is probably one of the key things that you need to understand when looking at your own operation, trying to figure out, am I covered or not? So let's start with the reporting scope, because that's the easier part, I think. So I mentioned before, initially, Europe or the EU Commission wanted flights to and from Europe to be covered, but also wanted operators to compensate their CO2 emissions of those flights.
Yeah. And a quick question, Mark. We see here that we have blue sections, red sections, and purple sections. So what does that refer to in our case?
This is no longer the case under EU ETS. The reporting scope of EU ETS only covers intra-European, sorry, yeah?
No, I'm sorry, I think we had a connection issue. I was just asking about what the blue, red, and purple sections indicate.
Okay, I'm sorry.
In this document.
All right. Yes. When you check out our guidance document, you will see that there's a color scheme behind this. And anything to do with EU ETS is highlighted in blue. Anything to do with the Swiss ETS is highlighted in red, and UK ETS will be purple. And there's another color which is green, and that's indicating that you're reading sections that are applicable to CORSIA.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
Does that? Yeah. Right. An outermost region I tried to explain. So to give you an example, the Canary Islands are considered an outermost region. The scope of UK ETS covers, the reporting scope covers all UK domestic flights, as well as flights from the UK to a European location and Switzerland, and likewise Switzerland domestic flights, flights to the UK, and flights to any European location. However, so those are the flights that you have to report, right, and compensate your CO2 emissions for. But now, if you want to find out if you're covered by the different systems, there's this extended full scope. And that means, in order to determine if an operator is covered, all flights to and from the UK and Europe and Switzerland are taken into consideration to determine if you're reaching the thresholds that are in place for commercial and private operators under those schemes. For commercial operators, it's 10,000 tons, and for non-commercial, it's 1,000 tons. Only once you hit those thresholds, you have to do the reporting, right? If you're below that, you won't have to do anything. And if you're above that, then you have to report and compensate your CO2 emissions by purchasing carbon allowances. So what is also probably interesting for you to understand, EU ETS or the ETS schemes are all cap and trade systems, and they are referring to the individual operator, whereas CORSIA is a global system that I will be speaking to when we look at the next slide. Unless, Claude, you have another question.
No, I think it's a good time to move to the next slide, but certainly my first impression hearing this is that they certainly make it complicated, right? We can have this shared goal, but they make it complicated, and they're not aligned necessarily the scope or the thresholds. And so, but the key for us perhaps to understand out of that introduction is that for small operators or those that don't necessarily fly very often to Europe, there might be exemptions that would allow you to not have to comply with these schemes. And so that's going to be key, I think, in our decision-making tree a bit later. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, we will touch base on that when we look at the decision tree, right? Okay, so I just started to talk about the fact that the ETS schemes are cap and trade systems, and they are referring to the individual operator, and you have to compensate your CO2 emissions by purchasing so-called carbon allowances. And this is different from CORSIA. CORSIA is a offsetting scheme that considers global aviation emissions, right? So ICAO has set a baseline here, which is 85% of 2019 global aviation emissions. Okay, every year operators now have to monitor and calculate and report their CORSIA related CO2 emissions, those are reported to the state of registry, right, or where your AOC has been issued, and then the state reports it to ICAO. ICAO then determines if overall carbon emissions of the global aviation industry is above or below this baseline. And only once it exceeds the baseline, then the whole sector has to offset or has to do their share, depending on their size of operation and the emissions that they've produced over the year, and have to compensate their carbon emissions by purchasing so-called CORSIA eligible emissions units. Those eligible emissions units, to give you an example, are offsets that come from projects such as reforestation in South America, renewable energy projects in Asia, or methane capture initiatives in Africa, just to mention a few. And so this is one of the key differences. Even though both schemes and systems try to mitigate climate change, how you do your compensation is different, right? The threshold that I mentioned before, I'm sorry, you asked the question.
So this is meant as an introduction. It's not meant to scare anybody, but enough of introduction to basically understand whether or not you might be captured by these schemes, and then we'll provide some links where you want to look at later, should you want to read more into it. Thank you, Martina.
Yes, yes, and just to mention that one of the thresholds that I mentioned before, that's the 10,000 tons, is also applicable to CORSIA, and that's based on all international flights. And what is an international flight under CORSIA? It's a flight between two CORSIA member states. Domestic flights are not considered. Neither is it considered if you're a commercial or a private operator. The 10,000 ton threshold is applicable to any operator. So this is those are the slight differences and nuances between the different schemes. And now
it's been CORSIA, right? We're about 126 states, if I recall. And so it's good to verify whether your states are participating. In the EU, it's quite clear. All EU states are participants, as are the American states, but there are nuances as you go around the world for sure.
Yes.
Let's move to the next slide then.
Exactly.
Wow. So where do we start, Martina?
Yeah, good question. Where do we start?
Our audience, start.
So this is the decision tree that we have set up, trying to simplify this process as much as possible, because it certainly isn't simple. So basically, you're an operator, you're trying to figure out, does any or various or all of those schemes apply to my type of operation? And then there's various questions that you have to ask yourself and some data that you have to gather in order to find out. And so those are all the questions you have to ask yourself, but I think we should go step by step and move on to the next slide, and then we can dive into deep.
So we have rows and columns, right? So each row is a theme, and then we're looking as to whether or not we can exempt ourselves. So the first row, Martina.
Exactly. So first question you have to ask yourself is, what type of aircraft do you operate, and are those heavier than 5,700 kilograms maximum takeoff weight? Because if they're not, if you just operate very small and light aircraft below 5,700 kilograms, those are exempt of any of those schemes. Neither of the schemes considers those type of aircraft. If you operate aircraft that are heavier, then you should ask yourself the next question, which is on the next slide.
So if you're light, you get an exemption because you don't have the capability to carry all the paperwork required for these schemes. There you go. I understand. Okay.
Exactly.
So, you unfortunately have to go through the next question. It's not an automatic decision right there. So with a yes, we now have a question as to whether or not you can be excluded because of the type of flight. Martina.
Exactly. There's some type of flights, and it's actually logical, that are exempt of reporting, and those are medical, humanitarian, firefighting flights. So if the purpose of your operation is to provide only such flights, then you might as well be exempt. But however, if you do just a few charter flights or, I don't know, private flights, then you certainly have to carry on to the next question, which comes on the next slide.
And as a reminder, this decision-making tree is valid as of today, but you know the schemes are rapidly evolving still, and so we encourage you to look at primary references. This is meant to be an easy guide to get you started, but not a definitive reference forever. Thank you. So the next columns in that row on exclusions are what, Martina?
Yes, exactly. It's again about exclusions, and I know that you remember that I talked about thresholds and CO2 emissions per year already. However, under EU ETS, there is another exclusion which is only applicable to commercial aircraft operators, and it is an OR rule. So it's either 10,000 tons per year, like if you're below that, then you're exempt, or if you're operating less than 243 flights in 3 consecutive 4-month periods, that's when you can also be exempt. Meaning, let's say you have a large aircraft that you operate that produce a lot of CO2. Let's say it's above 10,000 tons, but only with a few flights, then you can also be exempt. But you should check very closely here.
So 3 times consecutive 4-month periods is a complicated way to say in a yearly period, but I think they do that so that it's a rotating average, right? So that you always, as you move a day forward in the calendar, you're not only counting from the 1st of January, you're counting from that day plus 1 the year before. Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
What does
so? Let's have a look at the next questions.
Next slide, if you please. Okay, so we've got 2 other rows, and the next 2 series of themes are how much CO2 emissions are you likely to put into the atmosphere, and there's a calculation to be done, and then where are you flying? So for the CO2 emissions, what are we looking at?
Yeah, this is what I've highlighted before, and just I cannot say that often enough, because it is the key decision factor actually if you're covered or not by any of the schemes. So for commercial aircraft operators under the ETS schemes, it's a threshold of 10,000 tons, taking into consideration, however, this extended full scope, meaning flights to and from Europe, as well as the flights within Europe to UK, Switzerland, etc., and the 1,000 ton threshold for private operators. Under CORSIA, as I mentioned, there's only 10,000 tons. And regardless which type of operation. So if you
start with a 10,000 in that first decision,
it
brings you to the question whether or not you're international. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And then CO2.
Pardon?
So how do, like if I'm flying from A to B, I've got 1,000 kilograms of fuel that I'm planning to burn on that. What is the calculation of how much CO2 I'm going to emit?
That is a very good question. So, so the calculation is 1 ton of CO2 produces 3.16 tons. 1 ton of jet fuel produces 3.16 tons of CO2 emissions. It used to be 3.15, but okay, let's say 3.16 because I know UK they still use 3.15, but. So this is your calculation, but then again, it's important that you look at the right flights, right? If you well, you can look at all of your flights to get a feeling of your global or annual CO2 emissions. But in regards to these schemes, it's important to look at the flights that are really covered by the different schemes, and that's what makes it very, very hard to find out nowadays if you're covered or not because of the different schemes.
Yeah, and we have some tools, right? So when we do the examples, fear not, we'll talk about a Eurocontrol tool that can help you in certain circumstances calculate that. I know that we as crews have a lot of things, and flight dispatchers and the like, we have a lot of things to calculate. This is one more, but there are tools, so that's all good. So what about box area? What does that mean? Where are we flying?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you need to ask yourself, where am I flying? Am I flying only domestic, or do I do international flights? Do I fly a lot to Europe, within Europe. So, so those are the questions you have to ask yourself. If you fly international, certainly CORSIA could be a topic for you. So then we can move on to the next questions, which are more related to ETS.
Yeah.
Next slide, yes, please.
We're still in the decision-making tree. We're going to see the last 2 rows, and then we'll put it together into some examples.
Yes.
So, there's more on the row for ops area.
Exactly.
I guess ETS has their own scope requirements as far as where you're flying. So how does that work, Martina?
Yes, so once you know you're flying international, then you should look for a little bit further down, and the key decision-making factor here for CORSIA would be, is the origin and destination state, is that a CORSIA relevant state or not? And that's then will lead you to the answer if you may or may not be covered by the scheme. For the different ETS schemes, then of course you have to look further. Did I do UK domestic flights? Did I perform flights departing UK? Likewise, Switzerland, were there any domestic flights there or departure flights from Switzerland? And also for the EU ETS, have I performed any flights within the EEA? By the way, EEA I haven't mentioned before, it's the European Economic Area, just in case. And if you've performed flight from the EEA to UK or Switzerland, then yeah, you should have a look at EU ETS as well. So maybe we can have a look at the full. We have probably not, or hopefully we haven't confused you more, but maybe we can look at the full decision tree again.
You know, the interaction between EU and EEA in this case, I think it's good to underline. And there are, you know, lists in the primary references which states are captured. And we'll have some of the good links in the chat later. So that's the whole tree, isn't it? So
it is.
Hopefully it's a little more clear after these very, very good explanations by Martina. This is meant to help you as operators and pilots to determine whether or not you might be captured, and as importantly, whether or not you could be exempt. And you know, with that early determination, it allows you to see whether or not you need more help, either by going through references or hiring an expert such as Martina to help out with your program compliance. Thank you. Should we try some examples? What do you think?
I think the next slide provides a little bit of theory again. I'm sorry. Before we move on to the practical part, I'm really sorry. So I will try to keep this quick, but just to let you know, right, you see all the 4 different schemes now, and as you can see, there's one box that covers both EU ETS and Swiss ETS. The reason being is that luckily Swiss ETS and the EU ETS are linked schemes. That means if an operator has to do either one, or not either one, if an operator has to do both, he can do this in one process. So only one monitoring plan, one annual emissions report, one registry account, and one authority that the operator has to report to. And this is fantastic. Unfortunately, and even though the UK ETS is very similar to the 2 other schemes, the EU and Swiss ETS, it's a complete separate system. So if an operator has to comply with the 3 European ETS schemes, he still has to set up a separate monitoring plan, separate annual emissions report, and separate registry account for UK ETS. Not even the carbon allowances that you have to use and purchase to surrender and to compensate for your CO2 emissions are the same. It's different carbon allowances that you have to use under the UK ETS.
So this by hand, you need like 4 pens with different colors, blue, red, purple, and green. I get it. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And for CORSIA, it really depends on where you are registered. So to give you an example, a European operator having to do all those 4 different reports and schemes, CORSIA is implemented within the ETS schemes. So no matter where you report your ETS to, as a European operator, you simply add a part about CORSIA compliance, you add your CORSIA annual emissions in your annual emissions report, you report it to the same authority that you report EU ETS to, so that's done. If you're an operator from outside of Europe, And let's say you have to do all those reports, right? So EU ETS, Swiss ETS, UK ETS, and CORSIA. Unfortunately, you have to do this separately because for EU ETS, you will get allocated to a specific member state. UK ETS, it's clear, you will report to UK. And for CORSIA, you have to report your CORSIA annual emissions to your national authority, right? The authority that has issued your AOC and where your company is registered. So that operator, unfortunately, has to set up 3 different reports. However, when you set up your report and also your monitoring plans, because this is what you initially have to do, those reports and plans are all very similar, asking very similar questions. So a suggestion here is you start setting it up for one of the schemes, and then you, at least for the monitoring plan where you describe your procedures of compliance, you can copy paste a lot of the information, change the wording from EU ETS to CORSIA, and then that's it. I'm not saying it's not a lot of work, but yes, it's you can use the information that you've put into one monitoring plan. Yeah.
Certainly. So as to which state would you register for in the EU if you're not based in the EU? Perhaps the examples will help with that, but is there an easy answer to?
Yes, certainly. So an operator that is a non-EU operator that has to comply with EU ETS will be allocated to the state where the operator in the initial year of operation, where the operator has performed most of the flights, right? If that's within France or not within, but to France or also within France, whatever, then this will be the country that the operator will be allocated to. But in order to try and find out, there's an official list of operators that is updated every year by the EU Commission that you can download online. I'm pretty sure it will be in our guidance document.
Mm-hmm.
It is in there, and you can check out that link and see and search for your name, for your company's name, and see which member state you have been allocated to.
And if you're not listed, fear not. The bureaucracy will catch up, and we'll talk how that happens, perhaps during the example. So let's move on to the next slide. That's great.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So real life example. So it's a small operator, but we have a big trip, and the client goes where the client wants to go. And in this case, we have a very exciting trip, planned where we're leaving from JFK. We're going to Porto in Portugal, Geneva, of course, Switzerland, Farnborough in the UK. A quick stop in Reykjavik for some meetings overnight, and then to Montreal, the home of international aviation with ICAO there. And so how do we know where to start, Martina?
Yes, that's a very good question, Captain Claude. Wow, you're really flying all over the place, as I can see. So by looking at the locations that you will be heading to, all of the different schemes would apply to this trip. Of course, I mean, you have to reach the thresholds over the whole year, right? Over the whole reporting year. But this trip covers all of the different schemes. So in order to find out where to start and if you're covered and to what extent, what I usually tell everybody to get is get registered. And you mentioned that before, get registered with Eurocontrol, because they are providing a Eurocontrol ETS support facility. This is how it is called, which provides any operator all over the world immediately with an overview, easy overview of the annual CO2 emissions, cut down to the different schemes already, right? And for that,
I'm sorry,
yes,
we over each other. My apologies. So what would that look like? As you get sort of a report, a written report, or online access to a portal? Okay.
Exactly. Let's move on quickly. Let's switch to the next slide, because that will provide you with an overview that you will get from Eurocontrol. Okay. So what you will get is extensive information in a zip file with all your flights, very detailed. But to get a first indication, where am I? You know, what are my CO2 emissions under the different schemes? You will get this overview printed in an email, okay? And what is really nice here, as you can see, very first column, it's all divided in the different schemes: EU, Swiss, UK ETS, and CORSIA, okay? And then the first two blue highlighted columns, you see the flights that are subject to reporting, so the flights as well as the CO2 emissions. And in the consecutive columns, those are the 3 consecutive 4 months periods. You can see, you know, have I reached the threshold of 243 flights? And then at the end, you see the overall flights, so summed up over the reporting or monitoring period, reporting period, and then the CO2 emissions. This example is a North American operator, a private operator, where the threshold of 1,000 ton applies. And you probably have realized that under UK ETS, there's only 1 flight and only 4 tons. And you may ask yourself, well, this operator certainly does not fall under UK ETS. And this is unfortunately wrong, because as you can see in column, I think that's number 7, 2, 4, 5, yeah, 7, there's the annual CO2 emissions of this operator, and that's 1,613 tons. And that's above 1,000 tons. And that means even though they've performed only 1 UK domestic flight, they have to do it all. Anyways, so this is really what you want to see, right? And unless your flight ops software provides for something like this, this is probably the easiest and fastest way to find out where do I stand, you know.
Okay, so this is called the Eurocontrol ETS tool.
Support facility. Yeah, support. Exactly.
Okay. We'll have a link in the chat later, so that's great.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So we can move back to the previous slide there. Okay, now you know, okay, those are my annual emissions or expected annual emissions, because you can use them to calculate, you know, what do I think, how many flights will I do until the end of the year. And that what you need, the next step that you need to question yourself, will I be a small emitter or do I need to do complex reporting? The reason why that is important is small emitters can use simplified reporting procedures, such as using the Eurocontrol data for compliance, such as having a much shorter emissions monitoring plan with less information that you have to provide. And all operators emitting less than 25,000 tons under the extended full scope per year are considered a small emitter, and those can make use of this. One benefit of this is also that you don't have to use external verification. If you're a large emitter, you have to use your own flight data, do your own calculations, do your own division between the different schemes, you know, trying to figure out which of my flights is CORSIA, EU ETS, etc. So it's very, very complicated nowadays, and that's why you would need an external verifier that is accredited to verify all the different reports in the different schemes. And if this is the case, you may want to start early on in the process to find a company that can do this.
So blessed are those that can fall into the small emitter category. Makes it a bit easier for sure. Should we try some other examples? This is great, Martina. Thank you. Yes,
this makes it much easier. Yeah. Next step would be, and we talked about this, we can look at the next example, but let me just finish quickly the processes that you have to go through. You have to determine your member state, right? We just touched on that, the European member state. If you're a non-EU operator, I mean, if you're a EU operator, it's clear. If you have an AOC, let's say in Cyprus, then clearly you're reporting to Cyprus. But if this is not the case, you have to find out about that. Then once you know, okay, I have to do something, then you need to monitor your emissions throughout the year, and make sure that you gather all the data that is needed for compliance, get your verifier if needed, right? And one step that you should start early on is to set up a registry account. And if you're covered by EU and UK ETS, that's 2 registry accounts that you have to set up. And the process is a very lengthy one. It takes 3 to 4 months get those set up. I mean, once they're set up, it's done. Okay, it's you will never have to do it again usually, but it's a very lengthy process, and it works a bit like a bank account. Hence why it's long, and you have to prove your identity, etc., to make sure that no fraud is being made there. Right? Yeah. Let's look at the next example, Captain Claude. I see you're traveling all over the world.
My charter company is becoming very successful. We've opened up a number of bases in Asia. In this case, we have some trips leaving in this particular example. From Tokyo, we're going to Finland, Switzerland, Greece, and then back to Shanghai. But it could go the other way around. And of course, we're hoping to open up some new bases in the ROK and then in Southeast Asia soon. So how does that change any of this, if it does? Thank you.
Yeah. So if you change that routing and you would perform that more often, I see. So you're flying, as you just mentioned, from Japan and over to Europe, also touching Switzerland and then to Southeast Asia. So it seems as though most of the schemes will apply. However, as you not touch the UK, you will not be covered by the UK ETS.
So we save ourselves that. Which is
you can save that one, exactly.
full credit to keep for later, but it's wonderful. All right, should we try another example then?
Yes.
Look forward to questions and answers very soon. So in this case, we've opened up a base in Farnborough, as some have, and we're flying to Edinburgh in Scotland, Belfast in Northern Ireland, and Guernsey Island in the Channel Islands. So how does that work for us?
Yeah, so as mentioned before, CORSIA does not consider any domestic flying. So in this case, you would not fall under CORSIA. You wouldn't be covered by that one. This is a bit special, of course, because you're flying from Farnborough, Edinburgh, Belfast, and Guernsey. So you're covering Great Britain, but also Guernsey. And Guernsey is called. Let me look this up. It's called, I think, let me have a quick look. So there's a guidance that the EU Commission has set up, because it's becoming really, really complicated, as I mentioned, with outermost regions being covered, with all the different schemes, right? The different flights, and even for people that work on this for a long time, it's become really complicated because there have been changes from last year over to this year. And Guernsey, I've just looked it up now, is called a UK Crown dependency. And even though flights to and from Guernsey will be considered in your extended full scope to determine if you're reaching the threshold, meaning if you're covered or not by the, in this case, UK ETS, you won't have to report or compensate the CO2 emissions of the flights between Belfast and Guernsey. So, so yes, so it's very complicated, but in this case, it seems it's only UK ETS that would apply if you do those flights.
Well, there's good news and I guess some slightly less good news. The good news is we save ourselves in this case from the EU and Swiss and CORSIA.
Exactly.
The caution here, and the reason we put this slide on for our audience, is that just when you think you've got things figured out, there are layers of complexity even within individual schemes such as the UK ETS. And so it's good to get the expertise. This is meant to be a quick introduction and to at least to share some awareness about how complex and still evolving this can be. So thank you, Martina. I think this is great. So should we tackle any questions that might come up from our esteemed audience?
There's one last thing, Captain.
Oh,
sorry,
Martina.
Catherine. One last thing, Captain Claude, that I would like to share with you and also with the audience, and that is also very important. So for any of those schemes, when you do your report and you surrender your allowances, there is deadlines, legally set deadlines for the reporting and surrendering of allowances. Under EU ETS, the deadline for reporting, and also UK ETS, is the 30th of April every year. However, under EU ETS, there's an exception here for Spain, who has an earlier deadline that is on the 28th of February. Why I'm saying this is that you do not want to miss this deadline, because if you miss it, there's sanctions that will apply, and those are very high monetary sanctions. It's 100 tons per CO2 per ton of CO2, 100 euros or pounds, in the UK it's pounds, per ton of CO2 that you were due to report and to surrender allowances for. So so this section, it's section number 11 in our guidance. You should really take care of, and when you talk to your member state, it's always talk to your member state, ask them tons of questions, and make sure that you know the deadlines that they are applying, because other member states, in addition to Spain, might have applied the 28th of February deadline by now, which I'm not aware of. I may not, but it cannot never be before the 28th of February. But just make sure that you stick to those deadlines to save yourself and your organization from those unnecessary penalties.
No, absolutely. It's a great point. Thanks for sharing, Martina. And look, and for many of these things are incentives and carrots, if you will, and sticks, in this case, penalties. And it's good to be aware of them all. And, you know, part of the incentives is any efforts on this will, of course, pay some dividends not only for your own operation, but will help the overall business aviation community reach our own commitments under the Business Aviation Commitment on Climate Change. But you might be exempt, right, if you're a small operator, or any of the other exemptions we talked about. So that's the incentives, but be aware that there are some penalties, as governments often do, to ensure, you know, timely compliance. So, Catherine, how are we looking for questions from our?
We have several questions going on, and I just want to say thank you guys for explaining that. It's quite the roadmap. And I wanted to mention that I'm putting some information. It's actually titled "Where to Find Further Information" for the audience. So there'll be links, and you'll see that here when I hit the. Whoops, not that button. Hang on. It is this button. All right, there it is. There's all the information and links for everyone. So we have a couple of questions that have come in during the your presentation, and a few that are still rolling in. The very first one is there a list of service provider companies approved by Eurocontrol?
That's an excellent question, Martina.
No, not that I'm aware of. Are we talking about service provider companies when it comes to external support with this? In this case, no. There's
a list of approved verifiers.
There's a list of verifiers, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the case. And the only approved tools that anybody can use for compliance is the Eurocontrol ETS support facility and the so-called small emitters tool, also having been set up by Eurocontrol. And for CORSIA, there's another tool. It's also only one that has been approved for using or applying simplified procedures. That's the CERT. That's been set up by ICAO.
Okay, and the small emitter tool is free, if I understood correctly, whereas the full ETS Eurocontrol tool has a nominal fee to cover administrative expenses, is the way it's been explained to us. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes, that is correct.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, that was a good question. Thank you for asking.
Yes, absolutely. And and thanks to the person who asked that. Another quick one is you guys mentioned primary references, and the question was, are those listed on page 29? I'm assuming that's of the guide. You might, so I don't know if you know that off the top of your.
I don't know, but it's the second to last page, I believe. With links, but there are links throughout the document as well that we encourage you to look at. And
Perfect.
With the benefit of search tools nowadays, using some of the keywords that you'll see in the guidance document, you'll be able to find it if there's any changes in the documents. Sometimes the regulators change their own paths to where to find their regulations. And so we, you know, these links are valid today, but they might change.
Okay, good, right. Due diligence there. So this is a deceptively simple question. I'm not sure, given what you all have been talking about, that it actually is, but the question is, what does a quote, what does a few flights mean, quotes, for commercial operators that allows an exemption? So you mentioned a few flights, if you're only doing a few flights.
Yeah, let's go back to the decision tree, the whole slide, if you will, that shows that, and then we'll walk through how that might work, because in this case, it's a question whether or not you're doing 243 flights in 3 consecutive 4-month quarters. But it's also a few flight mine means that you've got less than 1,000 pounds of CO2, sorry, kilograms, or less than 10,000 if you're commercial, right? So few can change depending on your circumstances. So I don't think few is defined in the regulation, neither in CORSIA nor ETS, whether it's UK, Swiss, or EU. But correct me if I'm wrong, Martina, but really you yourselves as an operator, it's on you to, I guess, refine that question to say, well, what does that look like for us few? Is it in terms of CO2 emissions? Is it in terms of number of flights? And, you know, if some of those flights are humanitarian, et cetera, those are exempt. So it's a little more complicated than just telling you it's 10 flights a year, because it depends on things as to which aircraft, how much you're emitting, and how many flights in 3 times 4 month periods. Is that a correct summary, Martina?
Yes. So the 243 flight rule really only applies to EU ETS and UK to the ETS schemes, okay, and only to commercial operators. So for the rest, it's really CO2 emission driven. Okay, so if you operate very large aircraft emitting a lot of CO2, really just a few flights, also depending on the routing, you know, if it's long distance flights, can bring you to the threshold, okay? But if you fly small aircraft and only do short haul flights, not producing lots of CO2, it can be many flights that bring you to the threshold. But it's really CO2 emission driven, the whole decision. Yeah.
So that was a great question, wasn't it? Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Thank you.
Helps.
Great question. I know. It's my favorite answer. It depends. Right. Okay. Here's another. Can you explain the difference again between a carbon allowance and a carbon offset?
Awesome questions, but I'll defer to Martina, please.
Yeah, that is a very good question. So a carbon allowance in the end is a traded commodity, right? Those allowances are produced, given out, I don't know the right term, but it's by the EU Commission. For the EU ETS, for Switzerland, it's Switzerland, and for the UK, it's the UK government. And those allowances are auctioned, right? And you can, I mean, if you're a really large corporation, you can go and try to purchase them through the auctions. Otherwise, I think anybody I have ever worked with would purchase it from a bank, or there's many brokers out there that also sell it. And they're not additional. They are something in paper, sort of, that allows you to emit those emissions, right? It's a compensation mechanism, and the reason they have set it up so it's a cap and trade system is it's really to penalize you if you emit a lot of CO2 emissions. It's actually to trigger that you're improving your technologies, that you're improving operational measures, right? To cut down on CO2 emissions and to, in the end, save on having to buy so many carbon allowances. And the difference to CORSIA is CORSIA is an offsetting scheme where you have to purchase offsets that are produced from projects that are additional, that are in addition trying to mitigate CO2 emissions elsewhere in the world through other mitigation measures, right? So this is the difference. Hope that's clear.
Yeah, no, that certainly helps. But you know, overall, the programs have the same goal, but they get there in a slightly different way. But it's a great question to ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting. Well, the next one is sort of related. It says, how can carbon removal companies ensure the credits they produce are CORSIA eligible offset units? And that may be beyond the scope here, but
question, and it's evolving still. But Martina, let's give it a quick summary of that.
Yeah, it is a bit beyond, and I have to say that my expertise is really more in the operational side of things,
Okay.
but there is, I mean, ICAO defines, right, which units are CORSIA eligible, and there's very clear guidance material on that, and those companies planning projects have to stick to that, and I would believe that those projects also have to undergo certification processes, but I'm sorry, I'm not the expert in this area, but
summary, and I'll provide a bit of color. So there is a technical advisory body at ICAO that advises the council with some recommendations as to which units can be eligible. It's a continuously evolving process. Experts from all around the world participate in this technical advisory body that provides this advice to the council, which then votes essentially and adopts those eligible units in a regular cycle. Yeah. But it's, of course, people are very mindful about the reputational risk, and so it is a strong vetting process. And so not all offsets are CORSIA eligible, that's for sure. It doesn't mean that those are not necessarily good. It just means they may have decided it's not worth the extra effort to go through the CORSIA eligibility process, or that they've started down that path, but they've not yet gone through all the steps. So yes, I hope that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see a sequel session for the webinar discussing different
a lot of that is,
aspects of this.
Wow. People to look at as well. There are some webinars directly from ICAO. Certainly this is a quick introduction, and you're right. This is more complex than we cover in an hour for sure, but it's great to have
so many things.
More questions.
All right. Yeah, so we do have time for a couple more. This is so why do we have to do this at all? So how do the authorities know that that the operation would be covered under any of the schemes, and the awareness of flying patterns? What is the background on that? Yeah. The why?
Don't tell anybody. Can we get away with it? Is the question, right? More or less.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it's a good question. Crosses every pilot's mind for sure. Crosses mine. Martina, how do they know?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and to be very honest, I'm being asked this very often. So, but the problem is they do know. So basically, the authorities also use the Eurocontrol data, right? They have access to this data, and with this data, they can see immediately if an operator is getting close to the threshold and exceeds the threshold. And 2 years ago, and that's not a very long time, the CORSIA relevant data within the Eurocontrol report was not really good, because it didn't cover a lot of flights that were performed outside of Europe, like completely outside of Europe, right? But now Eurocontrol has improved their data, has added data, ADS-B data, and that was only last year, causing a bit of hiccups in the beginning. But anyway, it really covers almost all flights globally now, also for CORSIA. So the ETS support facility report serves many organizations such as member states, verifiers, operators with this data, and that's why it's quite a good source, and I'm afraid you cannot get away with it. They will find out, and the problem is if they find out before you, they are legally, they're not obliged to tell you. I mean, the legal text says that it's the operator's obligation to monitor this. Even if you're an operator, let's say in South America, you're not even aware of EU ETS, it is and remains your obligation to be aware and to monitor this. But if they, let's say they do tell you, they usually would tell you, let's say in February, if you're lucky in January. And as I mentioned before, the deadline is very firm, and the deadline for reporting is the 31st of March, and it's hard, I would say hardly possible to get this done if you're unaware, if you have no clue about this, you know, to get everything set up, like the initial setup, right? Because the initial year is the most burdensome, within 8 weeks.
Yeah, so that underlines, actually, it's a great question, because it underlines the purpose for this webinar, and of course our guidance document, which is to provide you, our esteemed audience, with an introduction, you know, to this complex, still evolving set of intertwined regulatory schemes, and some situational awareness. We encourage you to, to look at the primary reference documents, as well as to reach out to experts like Martina and others should you need extra help with your compliance requirements. Yeah, that's great.
That's great. And I think if
we close off.
Oh, sorry, I stepped on you with that.
No, it's all good. I was just noting the time, and I'm very respectful.
Yes.
Time. So do we have?
There's one more question, and I think this kind of goes to what you were just saying, Claude. The question really is, if your country of operation is ETS and CORSIA, do you need to do both schemes? It's like, can you choose? I know you went through those examples, but this might be a nice little wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Martina, very briefly.
No, you cannot choose. If you're covered by both schemes, you have to do them both. However, there's within the reporting, right? It's ensured that you're not like, what do you say, double reporting, or that there's no duplicate, right? You're not offsetting CO2 emissions. You're not duplicating this, right? Because in this case, the intra-EU flights will be covered by EU ETS, and the international flights outside of Europe by CORSIA when you do the compensation. So it is ensured that there's no duplication here, and that operator is not paying twice, of course, but you cannot choose.
So more paperwork, virtual or not, but certainly you save yourself on the headaches later on. So this is awesome. Thank you very much, all, for joining us today. Thank you, Ms. Martina Bescher and Catherine and the whole team in the background. It was great to have you all here. I hope this provides all of you with a quick introduction to ETS and CORSIA compliance, and we encourage you good luck on this journey. So happy landings, everybody. Take good care. Happy landings.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending. This will be available as a recorded link on the IBAC website. Martina, Claude, you guys are awesome. What an incredible introduction. So thank you all. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you all in the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.